my friend and soon-to-be yours, Dr. Chip Roper.
Thank you. You guys have some real Google skills out here in Darien. Good morning. Actually, Doran could have introduced me as Chip Roper, the haunted man, because there's questions that haunt me, questions that I'm not sure how to answer, and if I landed on the negative answers to these questions, it would be a disaster. It would be just like, wouldn't be really sure life was worth continuing. And I really don't go there that much. But if I landed on positive answers to these questions, it would seem almost presumptuous. And I'm just not confident enough to do that. So I stay in the middle with these unanswered questions. And, just like you guys, I love having things that just stay on my list that I can't check the box, can't move on, can't get it done. And I find that these questions come out in my life at what I call the turns, at transition points. So what I want to do this morning is I want to share these three categories of turns, and some of them that are fresh in my life that raise these questions. I want to tell you what the questions are. I will get to that at the end, because I don't want you to fall asleep. No, it'll be more in the middle. Three questions that haunt every man, including me. And then I want to reflect on some words that Jesus shared with you, because I think he speaks to these questions. At least he does for me. So that's kind of where I'm headed this morning. So the three kinds of turns in our lives, I think, there's change, just normal life transition. There's trauma, and then there's success. All three of them raise these questions, stir them up for me. Change, I guess the biggest change in our lives is that we're in the emptying nest phase of life. So we have a 21-year-old, an 18-year-old, both in college, and a high school junior who already wants to be in college. All girls. And this summer in August, the two college ones were already gone, and the youngest one was she went to a friend's farm to ride horses, because that's one of the things she loves to do. So my wife and I were alone for 2 weeks. And I had plans, guys. I had plans. 2 weeks, empty nest. My plans did not turn out the way I thought, because she was depressed the whole time that our kids were gone. And really romantic 2 weeks. And it just made me realize that we are just headed into a new phase of life, and love our kids. They actually do love us most of the time, but it's just different. And some of you know you're in it. You don't see them very much, and it's really strange. And it raises questions. These questions I'm going to share with you this morning, they do come up for me in this as I look back on my time with my kids and the things I could have done and did do, and the good and the bad. I'm going to save the trauma one for last, because there's some things that are really fresh in my life that I'll get to in a second. But the success one is another interesting one. So I find that when I'm successful, that it kind of spins in two different directions. So part of my story is that about 2.5 years ago, I took a position with a nonprofit in New York City, and they said, well, you can come here and you can build this faith and work-related program, and you can do it if you can raise the money to pay for it. So, nice, right? My mother-in-law was not impressed with that. She said if I raised money, I could come work for her too. So, I chose New York. New York's actually easier. But starting this out, I had some goals and some metrics and that kind of thing. And so I've been reflecting on that at different points along the way. And I'm way ahead of plan. And that's God's intervention. I just started in New York with zero. Didn't know anybody. So sometimes when I'm doing really well, I'm like more of a jerk than normal, like it goes to my head, and I think it's because of me and things that I've done, and other times I'm just worried that the other shoe's going to fall. And I do kind of a quarterly update, did a big one at the end of the year, and some friends were like, boy, things are going really well. And And I'm already into 2017. I'm starting over. If you're in sales, it's kind of similar. You start over every year. The clock goes back to zero, and I'm just stressed out about, am I going to be able to keep this going? And so success for me is actually not always a great thing. Sometimes it makes me more arrogant and obnoxious. Sometimes it makes me more insecure and brings out these questions. And the third category is trauma, and it's the kind of places we get to in our lives where we just experience things that are way bigger than we are and are overwhelming. And the big trauma in our family right now is that my brother just went to prison, and I shared this with Paul last night and had a great time comparing notes with Chip yesterday. But he was raided by the FBI about a year and a half ago and caught with child porn and possessing images, not doing anything. And so we've been on this really strange journey as a family, figuring out what to do with that. He and I haven't really been close, so that gets thrown into the mix. My father, who was the glue that held our family together, passed away in 2010. So this is kind of the first major thing that we've dealt with without Dad, who would always just pull us together and say it's going to be okay, and he always knew what to do. And it's been hard to know how to deal with it. It's been hard to know what it means to and I guess that's it. Because I gotta keep going. But that is the trauma. And on Tuesday, I was in Philadelphia where he was sentenced, and with his family, my mom, and so it's just really fresh, and it leads into these questions. So what are they? I need to tell you the three questions that haunt me, three questions that haunt every man. I'm going to go through each. I'll tell you them real quick. I'm going to go through each one in a little bit more detail. Again, just share some bits of my story. So the first question is, do I have what it takes? Do I have what it takes? Do I have what it takes to be a man? And then you could fill in the blank what kind of man you want to be. But do I have what it takes is the first question. The second question is, are my best days behind me? Are my best days behind me? And the third question is, who is with me? Who is really with me? Do I have what it takes? Are my best days behind me? Who is really with me? So let's just take each in turn. So, do I have what it takes? This is a question of adequacy. And at least for me, I think I've been trying to prove that I have what it takes since I can remember. I was a short kid. I know I'm still short. But it's, when you're growing up, you're always waiting, you want to be tall. Everybody wants to be tall. And my parents were like, your growth spurt's going to come. They lied. And so that was like one of those things. I was adopted as an infant, and I thought that was a great thing. In a lot of ways it was, but once you get on the school bus, you realize not everybody sees the world the way you do, and that was something that was interesting to realize, that I was basically different than everybody else. And so there's some of those things, and I don't know what it is for you. Maybe you had a father who was never around, or you were never good enough for, and he just kind of beats this thing into you that you're just not good enough, and or you might not have what it takes. Sports is a place, where I was really into sports as a kid. It's very competitive. You're going to make the team. Are you going to get picked for dodgeball? It's always there. And as a kid that was small, I used to get picked on a bit. Of course, then I would go find other people to pick on later. It's part of how I compensated for it. I remember this guy. His name's Frank. Frank's a big guy, and he used to beat on me a little bit, in the locker room and that kind of thing. 7th grade. So one day, after taking some abuse from Frank, I decided to share with him how I felt. And I used sign language. You tracking? Yeah. The one-finger salute. And so Frank retaliated. He stuffed me in a locker. That really wasn't a big deal, though. I just waited for Frank to leave, and I had been in the locker before, and I knew how to get out and just moved on. But it was just kind of part of this thing of trying to prove myself. And Joe Ehrman, he played for the Colts when they were in Baltimore. He wrote a book called Seasons of Life. It's a great book for guys. And he says, we want to prove that we're men, and we do it through three things. We start with sports, it moves to women, and then it ends with money. And that's how we keep score. and that we just throw ourselves into those things to try and prove that we have what it takes. And one of the things that I found is I moved my family from suburban Philadelphia to New York City, and I left a life that was very comfortable to me, and I started over in my late 40s, I'm 49 now, was that this desire to prove myself came raging back. And I wanted to work all the time. I wanted to get out in front of the curve all the time. Didn't want anybody to get in my way. That's what I've always been like when I'm like in ambition mode. Don't get in my way. It's not going to be pretty. And it's just really there. It's really there. So do I have what it takes? It's a huge thing, guys. And it's a huge question we wrestle with, I think. I think it comes up at all these different turns in our lives from the time that we hit time, at least back in the good old days when we used to take showers together in gym class. Remember that? None of this sissy stuff with stalls and everything. You're just exposed to each other. It's just this kind of this culture that we've had to deal with, and it just stays with us throughout the course of our lives. Do we have what it takes? Can we prove that we're men? And it drives a lot of what we do. It drives a lot of what we do. The second question is, are my best days behind me? On this one, I think of my friend Rod. Rod and I, we go back probably 20 years or so, and Rod was an executive in a mental health care facility. So he had therapeutic training, and he also had an MBA, and you look at him and think, he's a model guy, he's a great man. He got burned out, and so he bought into a franchise with a mutual friend, and it didn't work. And so here he is, he's burned through a lot of his savings, and he doesn't know what to do. His wife is wondering, like, how are we going to pay the bills? We just lost our savings. And this is what he said to me. He says, I just wonder if some of my best days are behind me. That things were so good. Things were so good when I was in high school and I was painting fences on my summer job. Things were so good when we were in college. Things were not nearly as bad as I thought when I was the executive. I was in the executive team at that hospital, and now here I am. I tried to go out on my own and take a bold move, and it just didn't work. And I think, that's, again, those turns can do that to us. It's one of my fears in moving my family to the city. We lived, I was a pastor for 20 years in the suburbs of Philly. It was comfortable. We had a 3,000 square foot house and 2 acres and 2 dogs and 3 cats and 3 cars and 3 fish. I mean, we had the whole package. And we walked away from a lot of it. And we kind of felt like that's what God wanted us to do. I mean, that's what really drove a lot of it, or some of it anyway. But there are still times when I think I've completely changed the trajectory of my family, and I completely changed the experience of my kids, and did I make the right choice? And I think about back to when they were little and we were playing in the yard and all that. Well, that's gone, or you wonder about that. Those questions. And I know from walking with guys in the city that especially if they're in kind of a forced job change kind of situation, and we've been doing some things with NCS in the city to help with that, that's a question you ask. Are my best days behind me? And then third question is, who is with me? Who are my real friends that I can really count on? Just to rewind real quickly. So do I have what it takes is a question of adequacy. Am I adequate? Am I sufficient? Are my best days behind me is really a question of hope, because it's about the future. And, who is with me is a question of companionship. It's about friendship, which is what we're all about at NCS. I'm part of NCS Manhattan, by the way. And for this one, I think of a guy I knew named John. And I was a pastor. So when you're a pastor, you're like the official friend of last resort, I don't have any friends. I'm not going to pay up somebody to be my friend. I'm just going to come talk to you because you don't charge. So John's sitting in my office and he's crying. John's Canadian. I didn't think Canadians cried, especially Canadian men. Hey, and he's crying, and he kind of gotten into a thing and with another woman. It didn't go as far as it could have, but things were blowing up in his marriage and everything. And I still can't believe it, that image of him sitting there crying. And he says, I don't have a friend. I don't have a friend. And he was alone. And he was wrestling with this question, who's with me? And Paul, you kind of referenced it when you said some of us don't have a group of people we'd know that we could safely say, here, pray for me. And for me, in my early years of my life, the only way to be my friend is if you shared my ambitions. If you weren't, I started a small company when I was 19. I had a band, a rock band, about the same time. Even when my church, like if you weren't in, it was going to be really hard for me to have time for you to be my friend. So it was very conditional, very conditional. And I also found it on the other side, as I grew up a little bit and got some wisdom, I found it hard to be friends with people in my church. I got burned multiple times, being real, being vulnerable with guys in my church. We'd be out to lunch, and I'd just be talking about something that was hard, and that thing would surface in a board meeting. And you'd just be like, I'm not doing that again. I'm not going to share that part of me again. And but we wrestle with this question. I mean, let's be honest. With our spouses, I think it's the same thing. If you're married or you have been married, sometimes you think, is she really with me? And we could spin it all around. Are we being the right kind of husband and the right guy? All that. Lots to learn there. But it's just gets to that. You can be very married and very alone. And we've had seasons of that. We've been married 28 years, so we've had a lot of ups and downs. And so that's another question. It's a question of companionship. So those are 3 questions. And do I have what it takes? Are my best days behind me? And who is with me? And I wrestle with them all the time. They just seem to fall off the truck when you make a turn. And my life is full of turns, and I'm sure yours is too. But I don't want to leave you there. I want to share with you some words that Jesus shared that have helped me. And it's not fixed, by the way, guys. The questions aren't answered and done. But these words, I just keep coming back to them. I want to read them to you. They're from John 15. And I just want to draw some connections between what Jesus says and these questions that we deal with. So this is John 15. It's actually the first 17 verses. So here we go. He says, I'm the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. And he cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit, so they'll produce even more. You've already been pruned and purified by the message I've given you. So remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot produce fruit. You cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine, and you are the branches. Those who remain in me, and I in them, will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are gathered into a pile to be buried. But if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask anything you want, and it will be granted. When you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples, and this brings great glory to my Father. I have loved you even as the Father has loved me, so remain in my love. When you obey my commandments, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you these things so that you will be filled with my joy. Yes, your joy will overflow. So this is my commandment. Love each other in the same way I've loved you. There's no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You're my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you slaves, but because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends, since I have told you everything the Father has told me. You didn't choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you to produce lasting fruit, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. And so this is my commandment: love each other. So there's a lot there. I just want to draw a couple connections. First question: do I have what it takes? In that phrase, he says, without me, you can do nothing. So I think if I was hanging out with Jesus and I said, I'm wrestling with this question, do I have what it takes? I think he would say, no. You don't have what it takes. You really don't. You've got some talent. You've had a great family that's poured a lot of love and opportunity into you. And you like to work hard, but you don't have what it takes, Chip. Without me, you can do nothing. Nothing that will last, nothing that will matter, Nothing that will even satisfy the deepest ache in your soul. First answer, no. And this is what's really amazing, I think, and attractive to me about Jesus. He doesn't stop there. There's a but that without me you can do nothing, but with me you can have this fruitful life. And when I assess somebody and decide they don't have what it takes, I move on. Have you ever been at a cocktail party thing and somebody's talking to you and it's obvious they don't want to talk to you? This happens to me all the time. People look over my head and they're like, oh yeah, you're down there, but I really want to talk to him. But that's what we do. We size people up and we decide, do I really want to enter? And Jesus sizes us up and says, no, you don't have what it takes, but I want you anyway. That's the gospel. That's grace. That's God's love reaching out to us. And this just takes sort of some of that negative energy and fear out of that question. Do I have what it takes? And no, you don't have what it takes on your own, but I can make you adequate. I can give you what you need. And Jesus said over and over again there, abide in me, live in me. It all comes back to this relationship. So I see that connection really clearly. The second question, are my best days behind me, which is a question of hope. I think there's a lot of hope in his words for me in John 15. He's saying, because I don't know what the future is going to hold, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to succeed at this thing, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to live and survive, and I don't want to just do that. I want to thrive in New York City with my family and all that. There's a lot of I don't knows, but he's saying, you will be fruitful. You will have your prayers answered. You will have joy. And I just keep coming back to that. I'm thinking, my best days don't have to be behind me. And I don't know what, it may not turn out exactly the way I wanted to in my script. It never does. But the days ahead don't have to be bad. They don't have to be dark. They don't have to be empty. I'm not going to be just treading water waiting for the end. I don't have to fear that. I can say, good things are coming. Good things are coming. I don't know how they're all going to be packaged. I don't know exactly what my life is going to look like. But I'm promised fruitfulness, which to me is a life that just has this natural ability to reproduce good in yourself and others. That's this agricultural image of life just multiplying. That's fruitfulness. And my prayers, God cares about what I pray about. He's engaged in my life. He's on my side. And joy, that's what I really want. I want to be able to have a sense of gladness and optimism that is not dependent on the circumstances of my life. Joy. And I taste it every now and then. I get appetizers, when I slow down and stop striving. But Jesus promises all that in these words. It's right there. And then the last one about companionship is really interesting because he says, he says a couple things to that question, will we be alone? First of all, he says, you're never alone because I'll be your friend. I'm going to call you friends. And maybe that's the bumper, the church answer, the bumper sticker answer, that Jesus is your friend. But I'll tell you guys, there's sometimes when he really is the only friend that's accessible. One of the pivotal points in my life, in another thread. So I said I was adopted. As an infant, I got to meet my biological parents in stages. And when I was driving up the Pennsylvania Turnpike to meet my biological father for the first time, and I was scared and I was nervous, and I was scared about what this would be like. Would he reject? What's he like? Is this going to be awkward? Is he going to reject me? Is he going to accept me? There's all that stuff that goes on. And then, because I don't like to be slowed down, I'm also wondering, what are the implications of this going to be? What are the expectations going to be? What is my responsibility going to be? Oh, it's not me. Pause for this Amber Alert. So anyway, I'm driving up the Pennsylvania Turnpike by myself, and I was I felt the friendship of Jesus in just a really fresh and real way. I just felt like God was saying to me, I am your Father no matter how this goes, and I'm going to be with you through this. And you don't need this guy to love you or accept you because you're already loved and accepted. And it wasn't like, I wasn't in church I wasn't reading the Bible. I was just having an existential experience of God's presence and love that just reassured me. And so when Jesus says, I call you friend, I think that's actually a big deal. But it's not enough because we need friendship with skin on. And he doesn't say, and go out and find some friends. In essence, what he says what my mom always used to say. If you want a friend, be one. Because he says, I tell you to love one another. And it's this idea that if you'll show up in other people's lives and you'll love them, and that's what we're all about in NCS, you will find yourself loved. You will find yourself in the company of friends. And one of the richest parts of the last two and a half years for me has actually been NCS in New York and getting to know the guys there and just showing up regularly and investing in each other's lives and having more male friends than I've ever had in my whole life. And it's awesome. It's awesome and it's possible. And that's how it works for me. But it's following the command. You got to love others. You invest in others and you get this friendship. So whenever somebody like me talks to guys like you and says, Jesus is the answer, actually when I'm sitting there, I don't like it. I feel like it's like an easy out. So I just wanted to close with a thought or two on that. Over and over, Jesus says, abide with me, live with me. Over and over again, he uses this organic metaphor, the vine and the branches, which is something that's living. And living things take time to be cultivated. And it's, I guess where I'd kind of land is I wouldn't say that Jesus answers these questions for me. I would say that I'm finding over and over again that he is the answerer of these questions for me. See the difference? He's not the answer like he's this commodity that I can put in a box and say, oh, I got it. It's more like in this interplay with him at the turns in my life, he gives me fresh answers. He's the answerer to these questions, saying, you don't have what it takes, but I'm still going to use you and change you and work in you. Your best days don't have to be. You had some good days and you had some bad days behind. The good old days weren't that good, let's face it. But some of those days were good and some weren't, but there's good things coming. And Chip Roper, you're not alone. You've got me and you're part of a company of brothers and sisters that you're not alone. And so it's not about finding the answer in him. It's about him becoming my answerer. And it's a relationship. That's a process that needs to grow over time. And guys, sometimes we suck at relationships because we're very like, oh, I decided I want to have a relationship. I decided I want to fix my marriage. Honey, I've decided to fix the marriage. Are you ready? How's that working for you, right? It doesn't work. Because it takes time to cultivate and grow. And that's the way it is with God. And I found myself trying, not just trying, I've investing more and more time in trying to have that time with God and with people who will push me towards him. Even though I'm a professional Christian, so to speak, I have to do all that too. And this is, at this point, today's report, February 24th, 2017, it's working. It's working. And God is answering those questions for me. And I think he can answer them for you. So let me just say a prayer for us as we close. Lord, thanks for today. Thanks for NCS where we've just made it almost a ritual out of being real. Like we don't have to hide anything here. And every single one of us needs that. And we know a dozen other guys that do too. And so thank you for this. Thanks for Paul and his leadership and everybody else here in Darien and for Jim and starting it and everything. Lord, thanks that we can also be real with you, that you are not shocked by our questions and our doubts and our failures at all, that we can process every ugly detail with you. And I ask that you'll move us in any way from being small men who are dominated by fear and doubt to men who have courage, not because we found some magical answer in ourselves, but because we found it in you, the answerer. In Jesus' name, amen.